Jai Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Gandhar Jai Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari Shri Shri Radha Vinod Bihari Ju Ki Jai Shri Govinda Gopinath Maran Mohan Ju Ki Jai Nitya Lila Pravishtam Vishnupa Rashatarashata Shishmar Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Gosai Maharaj Srila Gurudev Ki Jai Nitya Lila Pravishtam Vishnupa Rashatarashata Shishmar Bhakti Vedanta Vaman Gosai Maharaj Ki Jai Nitya Lila Pravishtam Vishnupa Rashatarashata Shishmar Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitya Pravishtam Vishnupa Rashatarashata Shishmar Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Gosai Maharaj Ki Jai Nitya Pravishtam Vishnupa Rashatarashata Shishmar Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Gosai Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitya Pravishta Mahabhagavat Srila Gaurkishora Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai Nitya Pravishta Srila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai Nitya Pravishta Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai Shri Rupanu Gauriya Guru Varga Ki Jai Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Bhattadas Raghunath Shrar Gosai Prabhu Ki Jai Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shikor Parshad Vrinda Ki Jai Nama Jai Śrīla Haridāsa Ṭhākura Ki Jai प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासरी गौर भक्त वृंद की जाय श्री क्षेत्र मंडल गौर मंडल व्रज मंडल मथुर वृंदावन धाम की जाय सर्व अभिष्ट प्रदात गिरिराज महाराज की जाय राधा कुंज श्याम कुंज यमुना गंगा तुलसी भक्ति देवी की जाय श्री हरि नाम संकीर्तन की जाय श्री चैतन्य भागवत की जय श्रील वृंदावन दास ठाकुर की जय द गौड़ीय भाष्य श्रील भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी प्रभुपाद की जय श्री हरि नाम संकीर्तन की जय अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय समागत गौर भक्त वृंद की जय श्री निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल बोलो আমি বেশি খাবো না কারণ আমি মানে আমার খেতে হবে না তো যে তোমার লাগবে হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ মুড়ি Okay, sorry. Haribo Ganga Mataji and Raseshwari Mataji. Haribo. Okay, so okay, I'm gonna do this again because there was a bunch that I'm not gonna sing a kirtan today before we start because there is a lot that we weren't able to finish yesterday. And I don't want to go over time today also. So let's go over what we didn't finish yesterday. It will be here. One second. I think I deleted. Yeah, so we'll open it up here. Okay, so yesterday we completed the chapter 15, about the marriage of Vishvambar and Vishnupriya. That was a very delightful chapter, wasn't it? And then there were two long commentaries that I wasn't able to read. So I'm just going to read that now. Let's see how I can make this big though. That's too big. Okay, that's good. Okay, zoom is like this. Hey, how come that's not working? I guess that command is for something else. Okay, let's see another way to zoom. Let's just make it, let's see what 300% is like. Okay, it's really big. Okay, that's good. Okay, so let's read about the procession that went to the house of Vishnupriya's father, Sanatan Mishra. We'll read from this point onwards. Okay. Okay, so they had an amazing procession, and everybody was completely blissed out. And many of the Brahmanas, the pious men and women of Nadia who saw the Lord's marriage procession all floated in an ocean of bliss. Those Brahmanas who had beautiful daughters at home, they simply lamented. Oh, they said, "Why, we are most unfortunate. So how could we marry our daughters to such a boy? If we were more fortunate, we'd be able to marry our daughters to such a boy." Maybe let's do the Mangalacharana now and then I'll start reading. Then we'll just keep the flow going, yeah? I'm going to do that. So, let's start. Ajnanatirmirandhasya jnananjana shalakaya chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Gurave Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tarbhaktaya Namo Namaha. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ajanulambita bhujau kanakavadato sankirtanaikapitaro kamalaya Vishwambharo Dijavaro Yugadharma Palo Vande Jagat Priyakaro Karunavataro Namastrikala Satyaya Jagannatha Sutaya Cha Sabhrityaya Saputraya Sakalatraya Te Namaha. Avatirno Sakarunyo Parichinno Sarishvaro Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityanando Dvau Bhrataro Bhaje. Sajayati Vishuddha Vikrama Kanakabha Kamalaya Tikshana Varajanu Vilambi Sharbhujo Bahudha Bhakti Rasa Bhinartaka. Jayati Jayati Deva Krishna Chaitanya Chandra Jayati Jayati Kirtis Tasya Nitya Pavitra Jayati Jayati Bhrityas Tasya Vishveshamurter Jayati Jayati Nrityang Tasya Sarva Priyanam. Adya Shri Caitanya Priya Goshtir Charane Ashesha Prakare Mor Danda Paraname. Tabe Vando Shri Krishna Chaitanya Maheshwar Navadvīpe Avatara Nama Vishwambhar. Tavai Vasmi Na Jivami Tvaya Vina Iti Vigyaya Devi Tvang Nayamam Charanantikam. Bhaktya Vihina Aparada Lakshai Kshiptastakama Ditaranga Madhe Kripa Mai Tvam Sharanam Prapanna Vrinde Namaste Charanarvindam. Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hari Bol Kishore Prabhu and Karuna Didi, Hari Bol, and two other people I haven't seen yet. Alright, so let's do this. Chaitanya what is it? The glorification of Caitanya-bhāgavata and Śrīla Vrindavan-das Ṭhākura. Hari Bol, Nari Hari Prabhu and Bhavatarini Mataji. Pranams to both of you. Okay. Ore mura lok shuno Caitanya mangal, Caitanya mahima jate jani beshakal, Caitanya Krishna lila bhagavate kohe ved vyas, Caitanya lila ravyas, Vrindavana das, Vrindavana das koilo Caitanya mangal, Jahara shavane nashe sarvaya mangal, Caitanya nitar jate janiye mahima, Ajate jani Krishna bhakti siddhanter sima, Bhagavate jato bhakti siddhanter sar. Likhiya chen iha jani koriya udhar, Caitanya mangala shune jadi pashandi javan, Sheho maha Vaishnav hoy tatakhan, Amanushe rachite nare, Aiche granta dhanya, Vrindavana dasamuke bhakta Śrī Caitanya. Vrindavana dasa pade koti namaskar, Aiche granta korite ho tarila sansar, Narayani Caitanya ruchishta bhajan, Tar garbe janmila Śrī dasa Vrindavan, Tar ki arbhuta Caitanya charita varnan, Jahara shavane shuddha koilo tribhuvan, Asahaje vichitra madhur Caitanya vihar, Vrindavana dasa mukhe amrite dhar, Vrindavana dasa mukhe amrite dhar. Jai Śrī Caitanya-bhāgavata ki jai. Oh, by nature, all the activities of Śrī Caitanya Mahaprabhu are very wonderful and sweet, and when they are described by Śrīla Vrindavan-das Ṭhākura, they become like a shower of nectar. Jai Śrī Caitanya-bhāgavata ki jai, Śrīla Vrindavan-das Ṭhākura ki jai. The Gaudiya Bhashya of Śrīla Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada ki jai. Hari Bol, everybody. Dandavat pranams. So over the next, I think, let's just check this out for a second. There are, I think like 60,000 words. No, I don't remember. Oops, I stopped sharing my screen. Here, let's check this out. There are, in this chapter that we're beginning today, about Haridāsa Ṭhākura, the glories of Haridāsa Ṭhākura, there are 30,000 words. And so that will take us about 6 days, I guess, to read. Yeah, 6 days. So we're going to be reading about Haridāsa Ṭhākura over the next week. But yeah, as I was mentioning before, we weren't able to complete this last chapter on Vishnu, on the marriage of Vishvambar and Vishnupriya. So I'm going to, we didn't read too long purport, so we're going to read that now. That's why I'm starting a little bit earlier, because it was a very long commentary. Okay. Wow, there's so many. Okay, I'm about to read the full chapter again, so I need to stop going back. But Okay, so the all the 1 second. Let me make this bigger. Text bigger. $24. Okay, so they performed. Was this the day of or the day before? I can't remember. I think it's the day of the marriage. They performed the Nandi Mukha ceremony in the marriage of Vishwambar and Vishnupriya. So, what is Nandi Mukha? Nandi Mukha is a combination of Nandi means glorification or good fortune, and Mukha means principle or auspicious beginning. So this ceremony is an elaboration of Shraddha, or offerings to the forefathers. Okay, so they're doing an elaborate worship of the forefathers. And in that festival, musical instruments, dancing, and singing created a tumult. And on all sides, the sweet sounds of triumphal rejoicing arose. Water pots, rice paddy, yogurt, ghee lamps, and mango leaves were placed inside and outside of the house. On all sides, various colored flags waved, and strings of mango leaves were tied to banana trees. Mother Sachi and other chaste women then began to perform the various rituals that were in current practice. Sachi first happily worshipped the Ganga, and then she went along with a group of musicians to worship goddess Shashti. After worshipping Shashti, she went to the houses of her relatives, where she performed the rituals in current practice before returning home. Thereafter, Shachi satisfied the women with puffed rice, bananas, oil, pan, and vermilion. By the influence of the Supreme Lord, all the items multiplied unlimitedly. Thus, Shachi also repeatedly gave the gifts to each woman. 1 second. The ladies all appeared to have taken bath in oil. There is not a single woman who did not feel complete satisfaction. Meanwhile, in great happiness at the house of Vishnupriya, her mother performs the various rituals in current practice. Okay, so now we're here. As the Raj Pandit, that's Vishnupriya's father, joyfully gave all his various possessions in charity, he floated in an ocean of bliss. After completing all the prescribed rituals, Sri Gaurasundar sat down and relaxed for a while. Thereafter, the Lord humbly satisfied all the brahmanas with foodstuffs and cloth. The Lord respectfully gave everyone charity according to their qualification. All the brahmanas affectionately blessed Vishwambar and went inside his house to eat. As the afternoon approached, everyone began to dress the Lord. The Lord's beautiful limbs were smeared with sandalwood pulp in which aguru had been mixed. His forehead was smeared with sandalwood paste in the shape of a half moon, and an enchanting tilak mark was drawn through it with aguru. He wore a wonderful crown on his head, and fragrant flower garlands covered his body. He wore fine yellow cloth with 3 corners tucked in, and his beautiful eyes were decorated with kajal. Durva grass was tied with a thread around his right wrist, and he held a mirror and a fresh banana leaf in his hands. His ears were adorned with gold earrings, and his arms were decorated with various jeweled armlets. In this way, everyone joyfully decorated the Lord's limb with appropriate items. On seeing the beautifully decorated form of the Lord, all the assembled men and women were overwhelmed, and they forgot themselves. At mid-afternoon, everyone said, "Now let us begin our auspicious journey. We will pass through the streets of Navadvīp for a few hours and arrive at the bride's house right at dusk." At that time, Buddhimanta Khan happily brought an exquisite palanquin for the Lord. Musical instruments and singing created a tumult, while the brahmanas chanted auspicious Vedic mantras. Professional blessers began to recite various prayers. The whole scene appeared as if bliss personified had advented. Lord Gauranga circumambulated his mother and offered obeisances to the brahmanas. Then, as he got into the palanquin, auspicious sounds of Jai, Jai were heard in all directions. As the women joined in with sounds of uludhwani, nothing other than auspicious vibrations could be heard. The Lord's procession first proceeded to the bank of the Ganga, where the half moon was seen overhead. Thousands of lamps were lit, and various fireworks were set off. The procession was led by Buddhimanta Khan's infantry, followed by the city tax collectors. They in turn were followed by people carrying various colored flags. Next came a group of jesters who dressed in various costumes. They were followed by diverse groups of dancers who all danced jubilantly. Various musical instruments were played like jayadhakas, viradhakas, mridangas, kahalas, kettle drums, snare drums, conch shells, flutes, karatals, varangas, horns, and panchashabdis. Who can name all the instruments that were played? Very curious what a panchashabdi is. Millions of children danced along with music, while the Lord watched and smiled. What to speak of the children, even the learned scholars gave up their inhibitions and danced. As they arrived at the bank of the Ganga, they sang, danced, and played musical instruments for some time. They showered flowers on the Ganga and they offered Ganga obeisances. Then they proceeded to happily move through the streets of Navadvīp. Everyone was astonished to see the extraordinary marriage procession. They remarked, "We've seen large marriages in the past, but we've never seen anything as opulent as this." The pious men and women of Nadia who saw the Lord's marriage procession all floated in an ocean of bliss. Those brahmanas who had beautiful daughters at home, they simply lamented, "We are most unfortunate. So how could we marry our daughters to such a boy? Only if we were fortunate would we be able to do so. I offer my obeisances unto the residents of Navadvīp, who are qualified to see such pastimes." In this way, the Lord joyfully moved throughout every quarter of Navadvīp. Then at dusk, the procession arrived at the house of Sanatan Mishra. At that time, there was a tumultuous sound of uludwani, and the musicians of both parties competed with each other. The word vade means competing. Therefore, on the basis of challenge, that means that they were challenging each other. Sanatan Mishra came out and greeted the Lord with great respect. He escorted the groom off the palanquin, embraced him, and offered him a suitable seat. As Sanatan Mishra showered the groom with flowers, he forgot himself in happiness. Then Sanatan Mishra brought the appropriate ingredients and sat down to offer welcome to his son-in-law. He duly performs the welcome ceremony by offering padya, arghya, achmaniya, cloth, and ornaments. Then Sanatan Mishra's wife and other ladies also welcomed the groom according to the prescribed regulations. She first placed dura grass and rice paddy on the head of the Lord. Then she offered him arati with a ghee lamp of 7 wicks. They showered the Lord with puffed rice paddy and coins, while uttering sounds of triumph. And in this way, all the rituals in current practice were performed. Vishnupriya, who was nicely decorated, was then carried on a seat to the marriage arena. Thereafter, the Lord's relatives joyfully lifted him by raising his seat. Following current practice, the Lord was blindfolded with a cloth, and the bride was made to circumambulate him 7 times. After circumambulation, Vishnupriya came before the Lord and offered him obeisances. All the ladies then showered flowers on the couple, and the 2 groups of musicians began to play. As the men and women all offered loud praise from all sides, it appeared as though the personification of happiness had incarnated there. The Universal Mother Vishnupriya then offered a flower garland to the Lord and surrendered herself at his lotus feet. Then Lord Gaurachandra sweetly smiled as he offered a flower garland to Vishnupriya. Thereafter, Lakshmi and Narayan happily showered flowers on each other. Unseen by common people, the demigods headed by Brahma joyfully showered flowers on the couple. Then the associates of the bride lifted her, and the associates of the groom lifted him, in a joyous competition over who could lift higher. One moment the associates of the Lord would win, and the next moment the associates of Vishnupriya would win. The people would smile as they informed the Lord, who was still blindfolded, of the results. The Lord smiled sweetly in reciprocation. In this way, everyone there floated in an ocean of ecstasy. Thousands of torches illuminated the arena, and nothing could be heard other than singing and the playing of musical instruments. At the time when the bride and groom exchanged glances, the tumultuous sound of music filled the entire universe. After exchanging glances, Sri Gaurasundar sat down with Vishnupriya. At that time, the ecstatic Sri Sanatan Mishra sat down to offer his daughter in marriage. Following the Vedic injunctions, Sanatan Mishra offered the Lord Padya, Arghya, and Achmaniya. Then he chanted the prescribed mantras for giving his daughter in marriage. With a desire to please Lord Vishnu, Sanatan Mishra then offered his daughter into the sacred hands of the Lord. He thereafter joyfully gave cows, land, bedding, servants, and maidservants to the couple. Sanatan Mishra invited Vishnupriya to sit on the Lord's left side, and then began to perform the fire sacrifice. After performing the rituals prescribed by the Vedas and local custom, Sanatan Mishra took the couple inside the house. Vaikuntha manifested in the house of Sanatan Mishra. Finally, they all sat to take their meal. After taking their meal, the Supreme Lord and his wife joyfully spent the auspicious night together. Who can describe the happiness enjoyed by Sanatan Mishra and his family members? Oh man, it's already 7:30. Sorry, I probably shouldn't have read this whole chapter again. It's so nice. You know what? I'm going to skip this Gaudiya Bhashya one more day and we'll read it tomorrow. Kings of the past, because this commentary alone is 1,500 words. It'll take 10 minutes to read. So kings of the past, like Nagnajit, Janak, Bhishmaka, and Jambavan, all experience good fortune. Might even actually take it take 15 minutes to read. So that same good fortune was now experienced by Sanatan Mishra and his family due to the previous service of Lord Vishnu. The next morning, the most fortunate Sanatan Mishra executed all the necessary traditional rituals. In the afternoon, when it was time for the Lord to return home, the musicians, singers, and dancers began their performances. The sound of joy filled all directions, and the ladies joined in by making auspicious sounds of uludhwani. The brahmanas offered their blessings by reciting verses appropriate for an auspicious journey. The musicians competitively played their dhakas, kettle drums, shanai, vadangas, and kartals. The Lord offered his obeisances to the respectable persons there and sat on the palanquin with Vishnupriya. Then the best of the Brahmins departed along with his associates, while everyone chanted, Hari, Hari. Everyone who saw the Lord on the way glorified him with appropriate words. The lady said, "She is very fortunate. She must have served Lakshmi and Parvati for many lifetimes." Someone said, "They look just like Shiva and Parvati," while someone else said, "They look like Lakshmi and Lord Hari." Another person said, "This couple look just like Kamadev and Rati," and someone said, "They look like Indra and Shachi." Someone else said, "They look like Ram and Sita." In this way, all the pious ladies talked amongst themselves. The men and women of Nadia were so fortunate that they were able to see the opulences of the Supreme Lord and his consort. By the auspicious glance of Lakshmi Narayan, all the people of Nadia became happy in all respects. As the Lord's marriage party passed through the streets, they danced, sang, played musical instruments, and showered flowers in great ecstasy. At an auspicious moment, the Lord and Vishnupriya arrived home in a merry mood. Thereupon, Mother Shachi and other chaste women joyfully welcomed their daughter-in-law home. As Lakshmi Narayan sat inside the house, the whole house was filled with sounds of joy. The ecstasy that was experienced there is beyond words. Therefore, who can describe its glories? Anyone who sees the marriage ceremony of the Supreme Lord is freed from all sinful reactions and returns to Vaikuntha. Because the Lord allowed everyone to see his marriage, he is known as Dayamoy, or he who is most merciful, and he's also known as Dinanath, or he who is the Lord of the fallen. Thereupon, the Lord satisfied everyone, the dancers, the professional blessers, and the beggars, with cloth, money, and sweet words. The Lord also happily gave cloth to each of the brahmanas, relatives, and friends. Then the Lord mercifully embraced Buddhimanta Khan, who felt such ecstasy that it is beyond all description. Although the Vedas describe the Lord's appearance and disappearance, there is actually no end to his pastimes. Okay, so we didn't read this commentary, I don't think. So let's read this. Gaudiya Bhashya by Śrīla Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada. Since the propensity for fruitive activities in the living entities is interrupted in due course of time, no one should illegitimately and offensively consider that the transcendental pastimes of the Supreme Lord, who is the controller of Maya, are equal to the fruitive endeavors of ordinary living entities. That is why the Vedic literatures have emphatically pointed out the eternal difference between the activities of the Lord, who is the controller of Maya, and the living entities, who are controlled by Maya. And thus he forewarns everyone about the dangerous Mayavad philosophy. When the Lord, with his eternal abode and associates, appear before the eyes of the people in this material world from Goloka Dham, it is called the Lord's avatar, or avirbhav. And when the Lord, with his eternal abode and associates, returns, that means when he disappears from the eyes of the people, to his eternally unmanifest kingdom of Goloka Dham from this material world, then it is called the Lord's antardhan, or tirobhav. By these activities, the Lord demonstrates the difference between his transcendental pastimes and the birth and death of ordinary living entities. The pastimes of the Supreme Lord are actually unbroken and uninterrupted. So back to verse 222. Who has the ability to describe in 100 years the pastimes that the Lord performs in half an hour? I have accepted the order of Nityananda Swarup on my head, and by his mercy, I am briefly writing about these pastimes. Whoever reads or hears these pastimes of the Supreme Lord certainly associates with Lord Gaurachandra. Accepting Śrī Caitanya and Nityananda Prabhu as my life and soul, I, Vrindavan Das, sing the glories of their lotus feet. Okay, so that was chapter 15, and now we're moving on to chapter 16, which is all about Haridāsa Ṭhākura. Hare Krishna, Govinda Saha, pranams. And as I mentioned, we're going to be reading about Haridāsa Ṭhākura over the next 6 or 7 days. And today's reading is just going to be, it's kind of like setting the scene for Haridāsa Ṭhākura. So we're not really going to be reading about Haridāsa Ṭhākura. It's mostly just about the state of the people in Navadvīp, when the chapter ends with Haridāsa Ṭhākura arriving in Navadvīp. Okay, so chapter 16, the glories of Śrī Haridāsa Ṭhākura. This chapter describes the glories of Thakur Śrī Haridāsa. And it also describes the godless condition of Navadvīp at that time, and the meeting of Haridāsa with Advaita Acharya, the Qazi's complaint against Haridāsa, the various tortures such as beating with sticks in 22 marketplaces, the astonishment of the Mohammedan king on seeing the opulence of Haridāsa, and the king's instruction to freely perform Krishna Sankirtan, and the execution of Haridāsa's chanting 3 lakhs of the names of Krishna within a cave at Pulia, and the description of a great snake who lived in that cave, the imitation of a pseudo-Brahmana, and the miserable fate of the so-called Brahmin resident of Harinadi, who is an offender at the feet of the Vaishnavas, and who is opposed to the loud chanting of the holy names. When Srimad Mahaprabhu enacted his pastimes as a householder and a teacher, the entire country was devoid of spiritual practices. Everyone was simply inclined for insignificant, ordinary enjoyment. Even those who studied or taught literatures like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam had no respect for Krishna Sankirtan, which is the purport of all scriptures and the life and soul of all education. Since only a few pure devotees chanted the holy names of Krishna together in a solitary place, they became the target of everyone's harassment, teasing, teasing, and mischief. The devotees could not find a single sympathetic person to whom they could reveal their mental distress. At such a time, Śrīla Haridāsa arrived at Navadvīp. So this is what we're reading today. And I'll read this summary tomorrow. Reading up to verse 17 only. Jaya Dina Bandhu Shri Gora Jaya Dina Bandhu Shri Gora Sundar Jaya Jaya Lakshmi Kanta Sabara Ishvar. All glories to Shri Gaurasundar, the friend of the poor. All glories to the Supreme Lord, the beloved of Lakshmi. Jaya Jaya Bhakta Rakha Hetu Avatar Jaya Sarvakala Satya Kirtana Vihar. All glories to the Lord, who is incarnated to protect the devotees. All glories to him who enjoys the chanting of the holy names and who is the eternal absolute truth. Bhakta Goshti Sahit Gauranga Jai Jai Shunile Kirtana Katha Bhakti Labhya Hoy. All glories to Sri Gauranga along with his associates. By hearing the topics of Lord Chaitanya, one attains devotional service to the Lord. Ādi-khaṇḍa Katha Ati Amriter Dhar Jahi Gauranger Sarva Mohana Vihar. The topics of Ādi-khaṇḍa are like a stream of nectar, full of the enchanting descriptions of Lord Gauranga's pastimes. Gaudiya Bhashya by Śrīla Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada. The phrase Sarva Mohan Vihar is explained as follows. Both those who see and those who hear about Gaurasundar's pastimes as a child and youth are enchanted. The concocted consideration of Parakya attributed to Gaurasundar by the Gaura Nagaris is not the purport of the phrase Sarva Mohan. He namate Vaikunta Nayaka Navadvīpe Grihastha Hoya Nadvija Rupe. In this way, the Lord of Vaikunta continued teaching as a householder. Prema Bhakti Prakasha Nimitta Avatar Taha Kichu Na Koren Icha Se Tahar. The Lord incarnated to distribute love and devotion, but by his supreme will, he had not yet begun. So the Lord had not yet begun to do what he incarnated for distributing love and Prem Bhakti Prakash was the Lord's nimitta, was the Lord's purpose. Was the reason for the Lord's descent. But Taha Kichu Nakorim, but until now he had not done it according to his desire. Gaudiya Bhashya. Although Gaurasundar appeared to distribute loving devotional service to Krishna, in his childhood pastimes he did not manifest such devotional service. This is proof of his independent will. His supreme will is absolute and independent. If a living entity, by awakening his subordinate nature, can understand his desire, then the eternally controlled living entity will no longer try to illegitimately dominate him. Haribol Krishna Mai Didi. Ati paramartha shunya shakala sangsar tuchcha rasa vishayeshe adara sabar. The entire world was devoid of spiritual practice, for everyone was attached to insignificant sense gratification. Gaudiya Bhashya. During the time of Gaurasundar, the living entities of this world were extremely maddened by the insignificant tastes of sense objects. Instead of realizing that the only purpose of life was to make spiritual advancement, people were eager for their own sense enjoyment and averse to the service of Krishna. In fact, the community of sense enjoyers who glorify religiosity, economic development, and sense gratification, and the community of renunciates who aspire for liberation from material existence, they all became completely devoid of devotional service to Krishna. Not even the slightest propensity for serving Krishna could be found in their hearts at any time. One may refer to the purport on the following verse 308. Okay. Gita Bhagavate Vaparaya J. John Tara Ona Bole Na Boloi Krishna Sankirtan. Even those who recited or heard Bhagavad Gita or even those who recited or heard Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, they never engaged in Sankirtan. Gaudiya Bhashya. Even if some persons exhibited an attempt to teach Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, in spite of studying these devotional scriptures, they never engaged in congregational chanting of the holy names. Nor did they realize that such chanting was the only purport of the devotional scriptures. Nor did they induce others to engage in congregational chanting. Hate tali diya shesha kala bhaktagan apana apani meli koren kirtan. The devotees performed kirtan among themselves while simply clapping their hands. Tahate o upahasa koroye sabare ihara ki karje dak chade uchasware. Yet people still criticized them by saying, "Why are they chanting so loudly?" Gaudiya Bhashya. The word dak is found in local language, and it means a loud sound made in the mouth, a scream, a call, an utterance, or an address. The word chade, coming from a local corruption of the word sara, which is derived from the Sanskrit verb sri plus nich, and the verb chada, which comes from the Hindi word chodana. That means to release or let out. In other words, to release from one's mouth. The phrase dak chade thus means shouting or making noise. Those devotees who chanted the names of Krishna while clapping their hands were ridiculed by foolish persons who were bewildered by the illusory energy and devoid of chanting the holy names of Krishna. Such persons did not at all understand the purpose of loudly chanting the names of Krishna. Ami Brahma Amate Boise Niranjan Dasa Prabhu Bhedva Koroye Ki Karan. I am the Supreme Brahman. Within me sits the absolute truth. So where is the difference between master and servant? Das Prabhu Bhed Koroye Ki Karan. Okay, so this commentary is going to take up pretty much the entire reading today. Ādi-khaṇḍa. That's what we're reading about today. So yeah, there's just like a few more verses after this that I'd like to finish with Haridāsa Ṭhākura arriving in Navadvīp, but pretty much like until 8:25 we're going to be reading this probably. So Gaudiya Bhashya by Śrīla Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada. The word Niranjan refers to one who is without anjan. Anjan, which, in other words, material designations born of the illusory energy or actions. The word Niranjan is one who is without anjan, one who is devoid of false identification, one who is faultless, one who is spotless, or one who is pure. That's the meaning of the word Niranjan. In the Mundaka Upanishad, it is stated, Tada vidvan punya pape vidhuya niranjana paramam samyam upaiti. Then, that less intelligent person transcends both pious and impious activities. He becomes free from worldly bondage and enters the divine abode of the Lord. The phrase Das Prabhu Bhed is explained as follows. The transcendental relationship in the form of Prabhu Das between the Supreme Brahman, the Almighty fully conscious Vishnu, the controller of Maya, and the minutely conscious living entities who are controlled by Maya. So the transcendental relationship between this Prabhu and Das, which is this is the purport of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, which is the ripened fruit of the Vedic desire tree, the natural commentary on the Brahma Sutras, and the essence of Vedic knowledge, or the Upanishads, which are the head of the Vedas. So Śrīmad Bhāgavatam is the ripened fruit of all that, and the main And this topic of the relationship between Prabhu and Das is, Śrīmad Bhāgavatam is the purport of that topic. The following are a few Vedic references regarding the phrase Das Prabhu Bhed. In the Mundaka Upanishad 3.2.3 and the Katha Upanishad 1.2.23, it is stated, Yam evaisha vrinute tena labhyas tasyaisha atma vivrinute tanungsvam. The Lord is obtained only by one whom he himself chooses. To such a person he manifests his own form. Also in the Katha Upanishad 2.1.1 and 2.1.1.4, it is stated, Kaschid dhira pratyag atmanam aikshad avritta chakshur amritatvam ichan. With a desire to attain immortality, a sober practitioner sees the Supreme Lord while closing his eyes. And mahantam vibhum atmanam matva dhiro nashochati. A sober worshipper, after realizing the great all-pervading Supersoul, no longer laments. In Katha Upanishad 2.2.3, it is stated, Madhye Vamanam Asinam Vishve Deva Upasate. Shri Vamandev is sitting amongst all the demigods who are worshipping him. In Katha Upanishad 2.2, verses 12 to 13, it is stated, Tam Atmastam Ye Nupashyanti Dhirastesham Sukam Shashvatam Shanti Shashvati Neteresham. Only the wise person who can see that the Supreme Soul within his heart becomes peaceful and enjoys, only the wise person who can see the Supreme Soul within his heart becomes peaceful and enjoys transcendental bliss. In Katha Upanishad 2.3.8, it is stated, Yajgyatva muchyate jantur amritatvam chagachati. By knowing him, even the animals attain liberation and become immortal. In Katha Upanishad 2.3.17, it is stated, Tang vidyach chukram amritam. Know for certain that he is pure and immortal. In the Mundaka Upanishad 1.1.4, it is stated, Dve vidye veditavya iti hasma yad brahmo vidho vadantin para chaiva para cha. There are two kinds of educational systems. One deals with transcendental knowledge, paravidya, and the other educational system deals with material knowledge, aparavidya. So paravidya and aparavidya. In the Mundaka Upanishad 1, 2, 12 and 13, it says, Tadvigyanartam sagurum eva bhigachet. In order to understand the transcendental science, one must approach a bona fide spiritual master. And tasmai savidvan upasanayayenaksharam purusham veda satyam provachatam tattvato brahma vidyam. The spiritual master properly instructs the surrendered disciple about the absolute truth. by which a disciple will understand the inexhaustible Lord. And Mundaka 2.1.10 states, Etad yo veda nihitam guhayam so vidya granthim vikirati hasomya. O beautiful one, he who knows this most confidential knowledge of the Supreme Brahman is freed from material bondage born of nescience. Mundaka 2.2.7 and 9 state, Tad vigyanena paripashyanti dhira anandarupam amritam yad vibhati. By knowledge of the absolute truth, the sober practitioners realize that blissful, immortal, all-pervading Supreme Lord. And Hiranmaye pare koshe virajam brahma nishkalam tachchu brahm jyotisham jyotis tadyad atma vido vidu. The Supreme Lord is a Supreme Brahman devoid of any connection with Maya and without any transformation, and he resides in the effulgent Supreme Abode beyond the material covering. The self-realized souls know him to be the bright illumination of the sun. Also, Mundaka Upanishad 3.1 verses 1-3 and Shvetashvatar Upanishad chapter 4 and Rik Samhita 2.3.17 state, wow, so this verse is quoted 3 times in the scriptures. Reused 3 times, I mean. Dva suparna sayujasakaya samanam vriksham parishashvajate tayor anya pipalam swadvatyanashanam anyo bhichakashiti. Sorry guys. The 2 companion birds sit together in the shelter of the same pipala tree. One of them is relishing the taste of the tree's berries, while the other refrains from eating and instead watches over his friend. Samani vrikshe purusho nimagno nishaya shochati muhyamana chushtam yada pashyatanyamishan asya mahimanam etivitashoka. Although the 2 birds are in the same tree, the enjoying bird is full of anxiety and morose, but if somehow he turns to his friend, the Lord, and knows his glories, at once he is freed from all anxiety. Yada pasya pasyate rukma varnam kartaram yisham purusham brahma yonim tada vidyan punya pape vidhuya niranjana paramam samyamupaiti. When one realizes the golden form of Lord Gauranga, who is the ultimate actor and the source of the Supreme Brahman, then that person attains the highest knowledge. He transcends both pious and impious activities. That person becomes free from worldly bondage and enters the divine abode of the Lord. Then Mundaka Upanishad 3.1.4 states, Atma krida atma rati kriyavanesha brahma vidam varishta. A practitioner who plays with the self-sporting Supreme Lord, and those who, a practitioner who plays with the self-sporting Supreme Lord and whose love and attachment is directed towards the Lord, that person is the topmost knower of Brahman. Mundaka 3.1. So, who is the topmost knower of Brahman? One who plays with the sporting Supreme Lord and whose love and attachment is completely directed towards the Lord. That is somebody who knows Brahman, not an impersonal, Advaitavadi. Mundaka 3.1.5 says, Yam pashyanti yattaya kshina dosha. He whom the faultless renounced practitioners see. Mundaka 3.1.8 states, Jnana prasadena vishuddha sattvas tutang pashyate nishkalam dhyayamanaha. If by the mercy of spiritual knowledge one meditates on the unchangeable, pure, Supreme Lord, he can get darshan of him. Mundaka 319 says, Esho nur atma chetasa veditavya. The soul is atomic in size and can be perceived by perfect intelligence. Mundaka 321 says, Upasate purusham ye hyakamaste shukram etad ativartanti dhiraha. Those sober persons who worship the most pure personality, Shri Krishna, become free from all material desires and are liberated from the bondage of Maya. Mundaka 324 states, Naimatma balahinena labhyo etar upayar yatate yastu vidvangstasyaisha atma vishate brahma dhama. A person devoid of strength in devotional service cannot achieve the Supreme Soul, the Lord. Only one who is eager to practice devotional service through the process of chanting his holy names can enter the supreme abode of the Lord. Mundaka 328 states, Tata vidvan nama rupar mukta parat param purusham upaiti divyam. At that time, a Vaishnav, conversant with the knowledge of the absolute truth, becomes free from material names and forms and attains the transcendental Supreme Lord, Shri Krishna. In the Taittiriya Upanishad 2.4, it is stated, Anandam Brahmano Vedvan na bibheti kadachana. After achieving the loving service of the Supreme Lord, a practitioner becomes fearless. Taittiriya 5 states, Atmanandamaya Ananda Atma Brahma Pucham Pratishta. The Supreme Lord is full of ecstasy. The impersonal Brahman is his bodily effulgence. He is the source of Brahman. Taittiriya 271 states, Yad Vaitat Sukritam Raso Vaisaha. Oh, there's Raso Vaisaha. Rasam Hyevayam Labdva Nandi Bhavati. Esha Yevanandayati. Ata Subhayam Gato Bhavati. When one understands the personality of Godhead, the reservoir of pleasure, Krishna, he actually becomes transcendental blissful. He becomes transcendentally blissful. He alone is the source of all pleasure. Therefore, by knowing him, one becomes fearless. Taittiriya 3.6 states, Ananda Brahmeti Vyajanat Anandodeva Kil Vimani Bhutani Jayante. Anandena Jatani Jivanti Anandam Prayatnyabhisang Vishantiti Tar Brahmeti Upasita. By undergoing austerity, he realized the blissful Supreme Brahman, from whom all living entities are born, by whom the living entities are maintained, and into whom the living entities enter at the time of annihilation. One should worship him alone. The Chandogya Upanishad 1.1 states, Om ittetar aksharam urgita mupasita. One should worship with the hymns of the Samaveda, that inexhaustible Lord, who is non-different from Omkar. Chandogya Upanishad 3.14 states, Sarva kala vidam brahma taj jalaniti shanta upasita. Whatever we see is a manifestation of Brahman. Everything is created, maintained, or annihilated by Brahman. Therefore, one should peacefully worship him. In Chandogya Upanishad 4.9, it is stated, Acharya Deva Vidya Vidita Sadishtam Prapayatiti. One should learn devotional service from an Acharya and worship the Lord, and then he will certainly attain his goal of life. Chandogya Upanishad 6.18.16 states, sa atma tattvam asi Shvetaketu iti. You are that soul, O Shvetaketu. Chandogya 6:14 states, Acharyavan Purusho Veda. One who approaches a bona fide spiritual master can understand everything about spiritual realization. Chandogya 7:25 states, Atmai Vedyam Saram iti sa vaesha evam pashyanevam manvan evam vijnanam atmaratir atmakrida atmamituna atmanandah saswarad bhavati. A practitioner who knows that this entire world is a form of the Supreme Soul, the Lord, who is self-satisfied, self-sporting, and engaged in enjoying pastimes with his associates, thus lives with the Lord as a distinct entity. Such a person then attains loving service to the Lord and becomes freed from material bondage. Oh my God. Chandogya 8:3 states, I think I'm actually not so tired, but this topic makes me a little bit tired, so I'm going to stand up, just so I don't step on the stage. Chandogya 8:3 states, Ata ya esha samprasado smach charirat samutaya param jyoti rupam sampadya svena rupena bhinishpadyata esha atmeti hova chaitar amritam bhayam etar brahmeti tasyaha va etasya brahmano nama satyam iti. Then the liberated soul who has achieved the causeless mercy of the Lord leaves his body and he attains the supreme effulgent Lord. He is then reinstated in his constitutional position as a servant of the Lord. He then reaches the conclusion that the Lord is the immortal, fearless, and the Almighty, that the Lord is the Almighty Supreme Soul. Oops, 1 second. Chandogya 8:12 states, Sa uttama purusha satatra paryate jakshat kridan ramamanaha tam va etam deva atmanam upasate. The topmost person is he who achieves the Supreme Lord and through devotional service. He enjoys food, and he sports in the abode of the Lord. The demigods worship that Supreme Lord. The Chandogya Upanishad 8:13 also states, this is a famous verse, Shamach chavalam prapadde shavalach chamam prapadde vidhuya papang dutva shariram kritam kritatma brahmalokam abhisambhavamiti. For receiving the mercy of Krishna, I surrender unto his energy, unto Śrī Radha. And for receiving the mercy of his energy, I surrender unto Krishna. By worshipping them, a practitioner becomes freed from all sinful reactions, and being fully satisfied, he goes to the eternal abode of the Lord. This is also used in reference to Sachinand Gaur Krishna, like Sachinand and Gaur Hari and Rajananand and Shamsundar Krishna. Jayabhadharma, it's explained like that, I think. The Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad 1:4 states, Atmanam eva priyam upasita. One should worship the Supreme Lord, who is most dear to everyone. Brihad Aranyaka 2:1 states, Maitasmin samvadishta indro vaikunto parajita seneti va aham etam upasya iti. Do not argue on this topic. I worship that Lord Hari who is full of 6 opulences, who resides in Vaikuntha, and whose associates are unconquerable. Brihad Aranyaka 2:1 further states, Yatagne kshudra vishvulinga vyucharantevam evasmar atmana sarve pranava sarvaloka sarvedeva sarvani bhutani vyucharanti. tasya upanishad satyasya satyam iti. Just as small sparks emanate from a big fire, similarly, all living entities, all planets, all the demigods, and all material elements, such as the earth, they emanate from the Supreme Soul, Śrī Govinda. His instructions are the supreme truth. Brihad Aranyaka 3.8 states, Yaditad aksharam gargi viditva sma lokat praiti sabramaha. O Gargi, one who is acquainted with that infallible truth by which one transcends death is a Brahmana. Brihad Aranyaka 4.4 states, Brahmaiva san brahapyeti. Tam etam vedanu vachanena brahmana vividishanti. He becomes as good as a Brahman and attains Brahman. He becomes as good as Brahman and he attains Brahman. The Brahmanas can understand this supreme Brahman, the Lord, through the Vedas. The Brihad Aranyaka 4.5 states, Atma va'are drashtavya shrotavyo mantavyo nidhidyasitavya. O Maitreyi, one should constantly follow, see, hear, and remember the Supreme Soul, Lord Govinda. Brihad Aranyaka 5.5 states, Te deva satyam evo pasate tad etat triaksharam satyam iti. The demigods worship this absolute truth. Therefore, these three syllables, sati ang, are the eternal truth. They're the satyam. In the Shvetashvatar Upanishad 1.7, it is stated, Brahmavido viditva lina brahmani tatpara yoni muktaha. Knowing that this supreme Brahman is beyond material creation, the knowers of Brahman become inclined towards him, and as a result of serving him, they become free from the 5 types of miseries. That's living within the womb, taking birth, becoming diseased, growing old, and dying. Shvetashvatar Upanishad 1.8 states, Bhoktri bhavaj gyatva deva muchate sarva pashay. If one understands the Supreme Lord, in other words, if one worships him with full knowledge, then he becomes free from all bondage. Shvetashvatar 1.9 says, Gya gyo dvav ajav ishani sho. Both the Supreme Lord and the living entities are spiritual. Of the two, the Supreme Lord is great, omnipotent, and omniscient, and the living entities are minute, subordinate spiritual sparks, and therefore eligible to possess limited knowledge and be controlled by Maya. But both are eternal. Shvetashvatar 1.10 says, Hara kshatarav atma ksharatmanav ishate deva ekaha. Although the living entities are inexhaustible, being proud by considering themselves the enjoyer of material bodies, they are prone to be conditioned by Maya. Both material nature and the living entities are the energies of and controlled by the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is one without a second. Shvetashvatar 1.11 states, Gyatva devam sarvapasha pahani. When one realizes the Supreme Lord in truth, he becomes freed from all material bondage. Shvetashvatar 1.12 states, Nata param veditavyam hikinchit. The Supreme Lord alone is the living entity's object of meditation. Shvetashvatar 1.15 also states, Evam atmatmani grihyate so satyenayanam tapasya yo nupashyanti. The Supersoul is situated within the core of everyone's heart. One who searches after that Supreme Lord through meditation and austerity can see him within his heart. Shvetashvatar 2:15 states, Yadatmatatvena tu brahmatattvam tipo pameneha yukta parpashyet ajam dhruvam sarva tatvar vishuddham gyatva devam muchyate sarva pashay. Without the mercy, let's see how much longer this is. Oh my god, this is so long. I'm like starting to, I haven't been following really, I've just been kind of in autopilot reading. Anyways, without the mercy of the Supreme Lord, there is no alternative for the living entities to get freedom from material bondage. Moreover, in order to receive his mercy, a living entity requires self-realization, just as the darkness inside a pot can only be dissipated by a lamp. Similarly, due to our ignorance, the Supreme Lord, who is the controller of the entire universe, appears unreal to us. When a living entity realizes himself, he will automatically realize the Supreme Lord. That's nice. When a living entity realizes himself, then he'll automatically realize the Supreme Lord. I remember learning a verse like that before. It's in Rupa Shiksha. Through knowledge of self-realization, a living entity understands that though the Supreme Lord is situated within his heart, he does not take birth like an ordinary living entity. He is aloof from material activities. He is untouched by nescience. He is infallible and supremely pure. Knowing this, the living entity becomes freed from all bondage. Sorry, no, this is like a verse from, oh God, what was it? God, I memorized it at one point, but it talks about the 21 attributes of the soul. And that was one of, anyways. Okay, Shvetashvatar 3:1 states, Ya eko jalavan ishata ishanibhi sarval lokan ishata ishanibhi. Through his own internal potency, the Supreme Absolute Truth controls the living entities. The Supreme Absolute controls the living entities. He controls the material nature. The Supreme Absolute Truth controls the time factor, their characteristics, and their activities, because all these things are subordinate to him. Shvetashvatar 3:4 states, Sa no buddhya shubhaya samyunaktu. May the Supreme Lord give us pure intelligence so that we can fix our mind in worshipping him. Shvetashvatar 3:7 states, Vishvasyaikam pariveshtitaram isham tam gyatva mritam bhavanti. This entire universe is within his grip. He is all-pervading, and he is one without a second. Everything has emanated from him. He is a supreme controller. If one meditates on him in this way, he achieves immortality. Shvetashvatar 3:8 says, Tam eva viditvati mrityum eti nanya panta vidyate yanaya. One can attain the perfect stage of liberation from birth and death simply by knowing the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is no other way to achieve this perfection. Shvetashvatar 3:10 states, Ya etad vidur amritas te bhavantyate tare dukkam evapyanti. Those who know the Supreme Brahman become immortal, and those who do not know him suffer the miseries of the material world. Shvetashvatar 3:17 says, Sarvasya Prabhum Ishanam Sarvasya Sharam Brihat. That Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supersoul, is the Prabhu. He is the master of all living entities. Therefore, he is the ultimate shelter of all living entities. Shvetashvatar 3:20 states, Tam akratum pashyati vittashoka dhatu prasadan mahimanamisham. When one's contamination due to sense gratification is destroyed by his mercy, and one develops attachment for the service of the Supreme Lord, such a person becomes fully satisfied and sees the glorious Lord. In this way, he becomes freed from all lamentation. Shvetashvatar 4:13 says, Kasmai devaya havisha videma. To him, the personality of Godhead, we offer our worship and oblations of ghee. Shvetashvatar 4.15 states, Tam eva gyatva mrityu pashas chinati. When a human being realizes and worships him, his material bondage is cut to pieces. Shvetashvatar 6.7 states, Vidama devam bhuvanesham idyam. We meditate on the Supreme Lord, who is worshipable to material leaders and controllers. Shvetashvatar 6.13 states, Gyatva devam muchyate sarva pashai. Therefore, one should know him in truth and engage in his devotional service. In this way, one will be relieved from all bondage born of nescience. Shvetashvatar 6.18 says, Tam hadevam atma buddhi prakasham mukshur vai sharanam aham prapadye. One must surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead if he at all wants liberation. Then Shvetashvatar Upanishad 6.23 states, Yasya deve para bhaktir yatha deve tatha guru tassaite katita hyartha prakashante mahatmana. Only unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master are all the imports of Vedic knowledge automatically revealed. In the Brahma Sutra 1.117, it is stated, Bheda vyapadeshachcha. Since the blissful Lord is different from the living entities, he cannot be accepted as belonging to the category of the living entities. Brahma Sutra 1.121 also states, Bheda vyapadeshachchanya. The Supersoul has been ascertained as different from exalted living entities like the Sun God. Therefore, the Supersoul is certainly different from the living entities. Yeah, he's not, he's the, anyways. When even just exalted living entities, then what to speak of the supreme living entity? Yeah, there's a big difference. Brahma Sutra 1.129 states, Navakturat mano pidshad iti ched adhyatma sambandha bhuma hyasmin. The Lord has established himself as the only worshipable object. The characteristics of the Supersoul are found in the individual soul to a great extent. Yet, the Supersoul is the ecstatic and almighty life and soul of the living entity. Interesting. Brahma Sutra 1.2.8 states, Sambhoga praptir iti chen na vaisheshyat. The distinction between the living entity and the Supreme Lord is that the living entity possesses a material body and is therefore under the control of karma. But even though the Supreme Lord dwells within the bodies of the living entities, he is not under the control of karma. That is why he is not subjected to the feelings of material happiness and distress. Brahma Sutra 1.2.11 states, Guham pravishtavatmano hitad darshanat. Both the living entity and the Supreme Lord are situated within the core of the living entity's heart. This is well known through the Puranas. Brahma Sutra 1.2.17 states, Anavastiter asambhava cha netara. The personality within your eyes is none other than the Supreme Brahman, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The characteristics of Brahman, such as immortality, cannot remain in a reflection in the Sun God or in the ordinary living entities. Brahma Sutra 1.2.20 states, Shariras chobaye pi hi bhedenai namadhiyate. Both the living entity and the Supersoul are present within the body. But the followers of Ādi-khaṇḍa and Madhyandina branches of the Vedas, those followers of those branches of the Vedas accept the Supersoul as different than the individual soul. Okay. Brahma Sutra 1.2.28 states, Ataeva na devata bhutang cha. Neither the living entities nor the demigods are fit to be called Vaishvanara, or the Supersoul. Only Lord Vishnu is the Supersoul. So how would Mayavadis answer to that? Like, what would they say to all these? Brahma Sutra 1.3.5 states, Bheda vyapadeshat. The The Supreme Lord is one, and He is one and the object of knowledge, whereas the living entities are many, and they are and the knowers. Thus, they are different. Brahma Sutra 137 states, Stitya dhanabhyam cha. One remains in the tree of material existence simply as the witness, while the other enjoys the fruits of that tree in the form of the results of karma. Therefore, they are different. Brahma Sutra 1.3.12 states, Anya bhava vyavritish. He is unseen, yet he sees everything. He is unheard, yet he is the object of hearing. Therefore, none other than the Supreme Brahman is inexhaustible. Brahma Sutra 1.3.18 states, Itara paramarshat sa iti chen na sambhavat. While describing the word dahara, or the supersoul, the living entities are also sometimes referred to as dahara. Therefore, one should not consider the supersoul as an ordinary living entity, because the 8 extraordinary qualities attributed to the supersoul can never fully manifest in the living entities. Brahma Sutra 1.3.20 states, Anyartascha paramarshaha. The mention of the living entities in relation to the word dahara, or supersoul, indicates that the living entities are meant to acquire knowledge about the supersoul. When a living entity achieves the Supreme Brahman through his service, he can also access the 8 extraordinary qualities, these 8 extraordinary qualities. Brahma Sutra 1.3.42 states, Sushukta yuktantayor bhedina. Anyways, I messed up. Both during deep sleep and after giving up the body, the living entity and the Supreme Brahman remain different. It is improper to say that a liberated soul becomes the Supreme Brahman. Moreover, the living entity does not possess the quality of omniscience. Hence, the difference is certain. Brahma Sutra 2.1.23 states, Ādi-khaṇḍa bheda nirdeshat. Since the Supreme Lord possesses unlimited potencies, he is superior to the living entities. The scriptures conclude that the Supreme Lord and the living entities are different because the living entities are subjected to lamentation and bewilderment, whereas the Supreme Lord is full of opulences. Brahma Sutra 2.3.20 states, Utkranti gatya gatinam. The living entity is infinitesimal, so he gives up his body, wanders to other planets, and again returns to this world to enjoy the fruits of his karma. The Lord is infinite and all-pervading, so these things are not applicable to him. Brahma Sutra 2.3.28 states, Pritag upadeshat. The constitutional knowledge of the soul is eternal. When the material designations of a conditioned living entity are vanquished, his original consciousness is revived. Brahma Sutra 2.3.29 states, Tad guna sharatvat tad vyapadesha pragyavat. Although the living entity is called a knower, he is full of knowledge because this quality is constitutionally present in him, exactly the same way as Lord Vishnu is declared by the Vedas to be omniscient. Yet, he is full of eternal knowledge. Oh my God. This is so long. Brahma Sutra 2.3.43 states, Anksho nana vyapadeshat. The living entities are parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. They are not the Supreme Brahman himself. Their relationship with the Lord is that of dependence on the Lord. Brahma Sutra 2.3.50 states, Abhasa evacha. Both the living entities and the incarnations such as Matsya have been described as ankshas, or parts. Yet the opponent's attempts to establish equality between the incarnations of the Lord and the living entities, with the argument that both are parts of the Supreme Lord, is simply a reflection of the truth, and it is contaminated by the fault of sat pratipaksha, or honest opposition. Okay. The incarnations such as Matsya are parts, because they have been invested with partial potencies, whereas the living entities are parts, because they are localized and minute in quantity. Yes. But Matsya is not localized, and Matsya is not minute in quantity. So they're completely different. There are innumerable such Vedic statements and sutras. Śrīla Saraswati Ṭhākura now is saying, there are innumerable such Vedic statements and sutras that describe the relationship between Das and Prabhu, or between living entities and Vishnu. Okay, we're at the end now. This is the last paragraph. The proud scholars who were envious of the Vaishnavas and who ridiculed the process of chanting the holy name of Krishna used to say, the living entity is the supreme Brahman. In other words, there is no difference between the living entity and the supreme Brahman. Therefore, we find no reason for the Vaishnavas to consider that Vishnu is the master and the living entities are his eternal servants. Due to such persons' material consideration conceptions, they thought that the relationship of master and servant between Vishnu and the living entities is certainly abominable, contaminated by the material modes, and temporary. So this is the state of the people in Navadvīp at that time. Okay, we're very close to the end. I know it's 8:30 already, but it'd be nice if we could just get to Haridāsa Ṭhākura. It'll be really quick. Sangsari shakala bole magiya khaite, dakiya boloy hari loka janaite. The materialist said, they loudly chant the name of Hari to attract attention for collecting alms. Gaudiya Bhashya. The phrase Sangsari Shakal refers to those persons who illicitly enjoy the tongue, the belly, and genitals, and those persons who are greedy for insignificant mundane prestige, who are lusty for lavishly enjoying material happiness, who are averse to the worship of Krishna, who consider the body as all in all, and who are attached to material objects. Those are the Sangsari Shakal. While seeing the chanters of Krishna's names through their glasses colored with the desire for their own material sense gratification, such persons used to deride the devotees by saying that they live in this world simply for the purpose of filling their bellies and obtaining mundane prestige, like themselves, while they externally loudly chant the names of Hari. E gulara ghara dwara pelai bhangiya, e jukti kore shab nadiya miliya. The people of Nadia met together and decided, let us break their doors and houses. Gaudiya Bhashya. I'm going to skip that Gaudiya Bhashya. We'll come to it tomorrow. Shuniya payen dukha sarva bhakta gane, sambhasha koren heno na payen jane. Hearing this, all the devotees felt great distress. They could not even find anyone qualified to speak with. Gaudiya Bhashya. Seeing the sinful and atheistic mentality of the envious non-devotees, the devotees of the Lord could not find any suitable person to converse with or to reciprocate within affectionate exchanges. So they couldn't find anybody to exchange affectionate dealings with. Shunya deki bhaktagan shakala sangsar, ha Krishna boliya dukha bhaven apar. The devotees saw the entire world as devoid of devotional service, so they prayed to Krishna in great distress. Gaudiya Bhashya. The word shunya means devoid of devotion to Lord Krishna. Seeing the absence of pure devotional service throughout Navadvīp at that time, the pure devotees of the Lord always prayed to Krishna, and they deeply considered how to remove the unlimited miseries of the distressed, conditioned living entities. He no kale tathai Śrīla Haridāsa Shuddha Vishnu Bhakti Jar Vigrahe Prakash. At that time, Haridāsa Ṭhākura arrived in Navadvīp. He was the personification of pure devotion to Lord Vishnu. He was the Prakash, the Vigraha Prakash of the Shuddha Vishnu Bhakti. He was Shuddha Bhakti Vishnu incarnate. Gaudiya Bhashya. When the pure devotees were lamenting the absence of pure devotional service throughout the entire country, at that time, by the will of Krishna, Śrī Haridāsa Ṭhākura arrived in Śrī Navadvīp Mayapur. Śrī Haridāsa Ṭhākura was not a preacher of pseudo-devotional service. He was always engaged in unalloyed execution of pure devotional service, which is without any ulterior motives, which is free from speculation on the impersonal Brahman, and which is devoid of the desire for enjoying material happiness. Ebe shuno Haridas Ṭhākurer katha, jahara shravane Krishna paibe sarvata. Now, please hear the topics of Śrīla Haridāsa Ṭhākura, for by hearing this narration, one certainly attains Krishna. Jai Śrīla Haridāsa Ṭhākura ki jai. So we will hear now all these amazing pastimes of Haridāsa Ṭhākura from tomorrow onwards. All right. Thanks for sticking with me till the end, even though I went over time. That was, I know, a lot of tattva, and I wasn't even actually able to focus a lot of that time. But anyhow, it is important to read these things because our acharyas gave so much emphasis, especially Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada and Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada or Srila Bhaktivedanta Keshav Goswami Maharaj. They put a lot of emphasis on this Mayavad Khandan and this, right, destroying these misconceptions of Mayavad philosophy. So, yeah, they would be happy with us entering into these, or going through these instructions. So. All right, I'm going to end here. We'll do Mahamantra and Kishore will do Jaidwani for us. Okay. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol. Kishore, would you like to do Jaidwani?
Hare Radha Vinar Bihare Radha Nainath Radha Raman Bihare Radha Marva Shri Shri Radha Shyam Sundar Jiv Ki Jai. Jai Nitya Leela Pravishtam Vishnupar Paramaham Sabri Brajakacharya Varya Asto Drashta Shishimad Bhakti Vigyan Srila Bharati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Nitya Leela Pravishtam Vishnupar Paramaham Sabri Brajakacharya Varya Asto Drashta Shishimad Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Parit Pavan Gurudev Ki Jai. Jai Nitya Leela Pravishtam Vishnupar Stotrashta Shishimad Bhakti Balab Tirtha Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Nitya Leela Pravishtam Vishnupar Stotrashta Shishimad Bhakti Vedanta Srila Vaman Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Nitya Leela Pravishtam Vishnupar Stotrashta Shishimad Bhakti Vedanta Vikram Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Nitya Leela Pravishtam Vishnupar Stotrashta Shishimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Goswami Maharaj Chagur Guru Śrīla Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Nitya Leela Pravishtam Vishnupar Stotrashta Shishimad Bhakti Dvaita Marva Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Nitya Leela Pravishtam Vishnupar Stotrashta Shishimad Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj Param Gurudev Acharya Keshari Ki Jai. Jai Nitya Leela Pravishtam Vishnupar Stotrashta Shishimad Jagar Guru Shri Varshabhanavi Daita Das Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Ṭhākura Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Sabrika Srila Prabhupada Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Ṭhākura Ki Jai. Nitya Leela Pravishtam Vishnupar Mahaparam Bhagavad Parabar Paramahamsa Shishimad Gaur Kishore Das Babji Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Nitya Leela Pravishtam Vishnupad Saptam Goswami Astotrashta Shishimad Suchidanand Bhakti Vinod Thakur Mahashaya Ki Jai. Jai Nitya Leela Pravishtam Vishnupar Vaishnav Sarvama Astotrashta Shishimad Jagannath Das Babji Maharaj Ki Jai. Sri Kundavasi Srila Madhusudan Das Babji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Udavadas Udaran Das Ki Jai. Garuvidan Acharya Shishil Baladev Vibhushan Prabhu Ki Jai. Mahamohabharidaya Shirmani Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur Par Ki Jai. Srila Rasikanand Murari Prabhu Ki Jai. श्री रामचंद्र कविराज की जाय। जय श्री ललोचन दास ठाकुर की जाय। श्रील नरोत्तम दास ठाकुर महाशय श्रीनिवासाचार्य श्यामानंद पंडित प्रभुत्राय की जाय। जय श्रील कृष्णदास कविराज गोस्वामी प्रभु की जाय। व्यस्तवतार अरिकावेशल वृंदावन दास ठाकुर महाशय की जाय। श्री अष्टकविराज वसुर जानवर नित्यानंद तुरज गोपाल श्री चौषति महंत की जाय। जय श्री रूप श्री सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भट्ट दास रघुनाथ षड गोस्वामी प्रभु की जाय। श्री स्वरूप दामोदर रोय श्री स्वरूप दामोदर रोय रमानंद लोकनाथ बुकरब आदि गौर परिषद वृंद की जाय। श्री विष्णु भक्ति प्रकाश विग्रह जगद्गुरु श्री श्रीमान नामाचार्य हरिदास ठाकुर महाशय की जाय। नमाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जाय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्त वृंद की जाय। श्रील ईश्वर परिपाद की जाय। श्रील मारविंद्र परिपाद की जाय। श्री अंडरदीप मायापुर सिमनदीप गौतमदीप मध्यदीप कलुदीप ऋतुदीप जानुदीप मातृ द्रुमादीप रुद्रादीप मात्मका श्रीनवदीप धाम की जाय। श्री एक चक्र धाम की जाय। श्री शांतिपुर धाम की जाय। मर्याद पुरुषोत्तम भगवान श्री रामचंद्र की जाय। प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम भगवान श्री चैतन्य महाप्रभु की जाय। लील पुरुषोत्तम भगवान ब्रजेंद्र नंदन श्याम सुंदर राधिकरमन श्री कृष्ण चंद्र की जाय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्णा गोपीनाथ गोपी गोपा ग गिरि गोवर्धन वृषभ वनन माक ब्रज मंडल धाम की जाय। श्री राधा कुंड श्याम कुंड गंग सखी यामन सखी तुलसी भक्ति देवी की जाय। वृषभानुनंदिनी श्रीमती राधा रानी ठाकुरानी की जाय। श्री ललिता विशाखा चित्रा चंपकलता तुंग विद्या इंदुलेखा रंग देवी सुदेवी आदि सखी वृंद की जाय। श्री अनंग प्रेम मजलाल श्री रूप लवंगा राग विलास गुण रति कस्तूरी आदि मंजारी वृंद की जाय। श्री कमल मंजरी की जय। श्री नयन मणि मंजरी की जय। श्रीमती वृंद देवी की जय। श्री भगवती पूर्णमासी कुमार देवी की जय। श्री गोपीश्वर श्री शिव महादेव की जय। जय श्री जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्रा सुदर्शन चक्र नीलमार विजय की जय। जय श्री जगन्नाथ पुरी पुरुषोत्तम क्षेत्र मंडल नीलाचल धाम की जय। श्री तत्व गोपीनाथ की जय। सर्वा विघ्न विनाशन करे भक्त विघ्न विनाश श्री नृसिंह देव की जाय। भक्तराज भक्त प्रवर श्री प्रहलाद महाराज की जाय। प्रहलाद लक्ष्मी नृसिंह देव की जाय। श्री चरिधाम चरि संप्रदाय चरि आचार्य की जाय। श्री मध्वा रमनुजा विष्णु स्वामी निम्बदित्याचार्य की जाय। आकर्मरा श्री चैतन्य मान की जाय। श्री गौरिया मान वृंद की जाय। श्री ब्रजपतान की जाय। ग्रंथरा श्रीमाद भगवताम भगवद गीता चैतन्य चरितामृत चैतन्य भगवत जैव धर्म आदि सर्व गौरिया वैष्णव ग्रंथ वृंद की जाय। त्रिभुवन मंगल श्री हरिनाम प्रभु की जाय। त्रिभुवन मंगल श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन युग धर्म की जाय। त्रिभुवन मंगल धन्य कलयुग तर्क ब्रह्म श्री हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे महामंत्र की जाय। श्री आनंदपुरी वैष्णव वृंद की जाय। श्री समगत गौर भक्त वृंद की जाय। श्री चैतन्य भागवत की जाय। श्रील हरिदास ठाकुर की जाय। श्रील वृंदावन दास ठाकुर की जाय। श्रील प्रभुपाद भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी ठाकुर की जाय। श्रील प्रभुपाद अवश्य की जाय। श्री आनंदपुरी वैष्णव वृंद की जय। समगत गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। ओम वृंदाय तुलसी देव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च कृष्ण भक्ति प्रददेवी सत्यवत्याय नमो नमः। वंशाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानं पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः।
Dandavat pranams, everybody. Kishore Krishna Prabhu, Nari Hari Prabhu, Bhavatarani Mataji, Krishna Mai Didi, and Ganga Mataji, Raseshwari Mataji, Karuna Didi, Govinda Saha, Savitri Didi, and who is that? Ami no Joy Per. Anyways, Hare Krishna to all of you, and I'll see you all tomorrow. For now, this is an exciting part of Caitanya-bhāgavata, the glories of Śrīla Haridāsa Ṭhākura. Yeah, we've actually we published a book a few years ago called Namacharya Śrīla Haridāsa Ṭhākura by my Śrīla Gurudev. I pretty much translated that book, but it's full of all these pastimes that we're going to be reading now. Yeah. Can you tell Leela? Yeah. Yes, you can.
So in the commentaries, in Srila Prabhupada's commentary, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada's commentary, he mentioned the word Alak Niranjan. And it reminded me of Gurudev would tell this story that one time Srimati Radhika became in man and she left Krishna. And Krishna was thinking, oh no, how to break her man. So Krishna, he dressed up as a Mayavadi sannyasi, or as a rishi, in tiger skin and everything, and curly locks, and matted locks and everything. And he went outside of Jatila's house, and he called out, Alak Niranjan, Alak Niranjan. And Jatila came out and asked, oh, what do you need, Baba? I'm begging for alms. Like, okay, Hacha, Baba. And Jatila, she went and she got some fruit or something, and she gave it, and she was going to give it to Krishna, disguised as a Mayavadi sannyasi, or I think a brahmachari actually. And Krishna said, no, I don't accept have alms like this. What do you mean? I don't know who you are. I don't know if you're a widow or what. But do you have some daughter that's married? You bring her. And Jatila said, okay. And Krishna said, and if you don't, I'll curse you all that your dynasties will suffer, and all bad things will happen to Abhimanyu, to your son Abhimanyu. And so she went back and got Srimati Radhika. And Srimati Radhika came out, but she was in man, and she had her face covered. And she came out with Lalita and Vishaka, and she was giving Krishna the fruit, some fruit or something. Krishna said, no, I don't take bhiksha like this. Yes, I don't know who you are. I cannot see your face. You please lift this up. And so Srimati Radhika was very shy, but she lifted it. And then Krishna said, I don't want this. I did not come for this bhiksha. What I want is your man. You please give me your man in donation. And so Srimati Radhika understood that this was Krishna. And so she started laughing, and she got the basket of fruit and she put it on Krishna's head. And all the gopis who were there heard cheering.
I remember they did that Leela for Gurudev in Badger one time. It was like full of all like atta and rice and all different things like that, and then they dumped it on top of Krishna's head and like that. Yeah, Gurudev really liked that Leela.
That's so nice.
Very nice to end that very dense, heavy tattva. It's kind of dry for people like me, and now end it with that sweet Leela. Thank you. Yes.
Also in Prabhupada's commentary, where it said that the materialists saw the Vaishnavas with a colored colored glasses, and it reminded me of this time in the 70s. I don't know how I met this is completely unrelated, but it reminded me of how in the 70s this close company called Levi's, they approached the devotees. They were saying, hey, do you guys want to do an advertisement for us? And they whatchamacallit? And they said, sure, her. And they dressed one of the devotees in a Levi's jacket. And there was a big poster saying, I don't go anywhere without my Levi's. Or if I can't bring my Levi's, I'm not joining. And it was a picture of the devotee in a jacket with devotees around.
Yeah, that's a Levi's jacket. Hare Krishna. I bet we could find that picture easily. Hare
I'm sure you can.
Devotees.
They told Prabhupada about it, and Prabhupada said, yes, this devotee is very intelligent.
Can't find. Anyways, yeah, I've seen that picture though. That's a famous one. I didn't know that was during Srila Prabhupada's time though. That's really neat. All right, so we will end for now and see you all tomorrow. Jai Shri Radhe. Shalom Alaikum. Hare Krishna. Yes, I'm not Indian. No. All right. See you all tomorrow. Just looking at the comment on YouTube. Okay, Hare Krishna.